Question 1. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly targeted by sophisticated cyber attacks that can compromise sensitive customer data. During a security incident, a cybersecurity analyst discovers that a critical server has been breached, potentially exposing personally identifiable information, PI. The analyst is under pressure to restore services quickly. Which of the following actions best aligns with U.S. regulatory frameworks and professional cybersecurity practices for handling such an incident? Option A. Immediately isolate the affected server, create a forensic image of its drives, and initiate the incident response plan's data breach notification procedures as outlined by internal policy, which is designed to comply with relevant U.S. data protection laws. Option B. Wipe the compromised server clean and rebuild it to restore services as quickly as possible, assuming the data loss is acceptable to minimize downtime. Option C. Continue normal operations on the affected server while attempting to identify the attacker, believing that isolating it might alert the attacker and cause them to delete evidence. Option D. Publicly announce the breach on social media to inform customers immediately, without first verifying the full scope of the compromise or consulting legal counsel. The correct answer is A. Immediately isolate the affected server, create a forensic image of its drives, and initiate the incident response plan's data breach notification procedures as outlined by internal policy, which is designed to comply with relevant U.S. data protection laws. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the imperative to adhere to established legal and regulatory frameworks. The pressure to contain a breach quickly can lead to hasty decisions that might inadvertently violate data privacy laws or compromise evidence integrity. Professionals must navigate this tension by understanding their legal obligations and implementing procedures that satisfy both security and compliance requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the preservation of evidence and adherence to the incident response plan, which is designed to align with relevant U.S. regulations such as HIPAA for health information or GDPR, if applicable to the data involved, though the exam focuses on U.S. frameworks. This methodical approach ensures that the investigation is conducted legally and ethically, minimizing the risk of legal repercussions and maintaining the integrity of the collected data for potential prosecution or audit. It demonstrates best professional practice by acknowledging that a swift but legally unsound response can be more damaging in the long run than a slightly delayed but compliant one. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately deleting compromised systems without proper forensic imaging. This action directly violates the principles of evidence preservation, mandated by various U.S. laws and cybersecurity best practices. It can lead to the loss of critical data needed for investigation, prosecution, and regulatory compliance, potentially resulting in significant fines and legal liabilities. Another incorrect approach is to share sensitive customer data with external parties without proper authorization or anonymization. This constitutes a severe breach of data privacy regulations, such as those enforced by the FTC or state-specific privacy laws. Such an action can lead to severe penalties, loss of customer trust, and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach is to ignore the incident entirely due to a lack of immediate understanding of the full scope. This inaction is a failure to meet the due diligence requirements expected of organizations under various U.S. cybersecurity regulations. It allows the threat to persist and potentially cause greater damage, exposing the organization to liability for negligence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a structured incident response framework that integrates legal and regulatory considerations from the outset. This involves having a predefined incident response plan that outlines steps for containment, eradication, and recovery, while also specifying protocols for evidence handling, data privacy, and stakeholder notification. When faced with an incident, the decision-making process should involve assessing the potential impact on data privacy and legal obligations, consulting with legal counsel if necessary, and prioritizing actions that are both effective for security and compliant with relevant U.S. laws. Question 2. Compliance review shows that during a recent security incident involving a suspected exfiltration of customer data, The incident response team immediately initiated a full system wipe and rebuild of the affected servers to restore service quickly, without first creating forensic images of the compromised systems or consulting with legal counsel regarding data breach notification requirements. What is the most appropriate course of action for the organization to take moving forward to address the compliance and legal ramifications of this incident response? Option A. Proceed with a full system rebuild and restore from clean backups, assuming that rapid restoration is the primary compliance objective. Option B. Issue a public statement acknowledging a security incident without detailing the nature of the data potentially compromised or the response taken. To avoid premature disclosure, Option C. Focus solely on enhancing technical security controls to prevent future incidents, considering the current incident response as a closed matter due to the system rebuild. Option D. Immediately engage legal counsel to assess the potential regulatory and legal implications of the incident and the response taken, and to guide subsequent actions, including any necessary notifications and reporting. The correct answer is D. Immediately engage legal counsel to assess the potential regulatory and legal implications of the incident and the response taken, and to guide subsequent actions, including any necessary notifications and reporting. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the imperative to adhere to established legal and regulatory frameworks. The urgency of a potential data breach necessitates swift action, but any deviation from established protocols, particularly those related to evidence preservation and notification, can have severe legal and reputational consequences. The challenge lies in making informed decisions under pressure that satisfy both technical requirements and compliance obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic process that prioritizes evidence integrity while initiating containment. This aligns with best practices in digital forensics and incident response, which are implicitly supported by U.S. regulatory frameworks such as HIPAA for healthcare data and various state data breach notification laws. These regulations, while not explicitly detailed in the CCNA Cyber Ops syllabus, underscore the importance of proper handling of sensitive information and the need for a traceable, defensible response. By isolating the affected systems without altering critical data, the security team preserves the integrity of potential evidence. Subsequently, engaging legal counsel ensures that all notification and reporting requirements, as mandated by relevant U.S. laws, are met accurately and within statutory timelines. This methodical approach minimizes legal exposure and demonstrates due diligence. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately wiping and rebuilding affected systems without proper forensic imaging. This action, while seemingly efficient for restoring operations, constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It destroys potential evidence crucial for understanding the scope of the breach, identifying the attacker's methods, and fulfilling legal obligations for reporting and investigation. This would violate principles of evidence preservation and could lead to penalties under various U.S. data protection laws if the breach involved protected information. Another incorrect approach is to delay engaging legal counsel and instead proceed with broad public disclosure of the incident before a thorough understanding of its nature and scope is achieved, and before legal advice on notification requirements is obtained. This can lead to premature or inaccurate public statements, potentially violating disclosure requirements under laws like the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, or other state-specific breach notification statutes. It also risks misrepresenting the situation, damaging public trust, and incurring legal liabilities for non-compliance with notification timelines and content. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize system restoration over evidence preservation by immediately restoring from backups without first creating forensic images of the compromised systems. This directly compromises the integrity of digital evidence. Many U.S. regulations, particularly those concerning financial or health data, require organizations to be able to demonstrate a thorough investigation and remediation process. Destroying evidence through immediate restoration makes it impossible to meet these requirements and could result in significant fines and legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should adopt a structured incident response plan that integrates technical actions with legal and compliance considerations. The decision-making process should involve 1. Immediate containment and isolation of affected systems to prevent further damage, prioritizing evidence preservation through imaging. 2. Escalation to internal or external legal counsel to understand notification obligations and legal ramifications. 3. Collaboration between technical and legal teams to determine the scope of the breach and the appropriate response, including communication strategies. 4. Adherence to documented procedures and regulatory requirements throughout the incident lifecycle. This layered approach ensures that immediate threats are addressed while maintaining legal and ethical integrity. Question 3. Consider a scenario where a critical web server in a US-based organization is suspected of being compromised, exhibiting unusual outbound network traffic and slow response times. The incident response team is under pressure from management to restore full service as quickly as possible. What is the most appropriate initial action for the incident response team to take to balance service restoration with the need for a thorough investigation? Option A. Begin troubleshooting the performance issues by restarting services and applying patches without documenting the current state of the system. Option B. Power down the affected server immediately to prevent further damage and then proceed with wiping and re-imaging the system. Option C. Disconnect the affected server from the network and await further instructions from management before taking any action. Option D. Immediately isolate the affected server from the network and create a forensic image of its storage and memory before proceeding with any remediation steps. The correct answer is D. Immediately isolate the affected server from the network and create a forensic image of its storage and memory before proceeding with any remediation steps. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the need for rapid incident response and the legal/regulatory obligations to preserve evidence and maintain data integrity. The pressure to restore services quickly can lead to actions that inadvertently compromise the forensic value of compromised systems, potentially hindering investigations and violating compliance requirements. Careful judgment is required to balance immediate operational needs with long-term security and legal imperatives. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves isolating the affected systems without immediately wiping or re-imaging them. This allows for the collection of volatile data, like memory contents, and the preservation of disk images for forensic analysis. This aligns with best practices in incident response and cybersecurity operations, which emphasize evidence preservation. While specific U.S. regulations are not explicitly detailed in the CCNA Cyber Ops curriculum, the underlying principles of due diligence, data integrity, and the potential need for legal proceedings necessitate a methodical approach to evidence handling. This method ensures that any subsequent actions are based on a thorough understanding of the incident, minimizing the risk of destroying crucial evidence. Incorrect approach is analysis, immediately wiping and re-imaging the affected servers, while seemingly efficient for restoring service, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action destroys all potential forensic evidence, including logs, malware artifacts, and indicators of compromise, making it impossible to determine the root cause, scope, or attribution of the incident. This failure to preserve evidence could violate internal policies, industry best practices, and potentially any future legal or regulatory requirements that mandate such preservation. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence in handling a security incident and a disregard for the investigative process. Another incorrect approach is to simply disconnect the affected systems from the network and wait for further instructions, without initiating any form of data preservation or analysis. While this prevents further spread, it fails to capture critical volatile data that is lost when systems are powered down or rebooted. This passive approach can also lead to delays in understanding the threat, allowing attackers more time to exfiltrate data or establish persistence. It signifies a reactive rather than proactive incident response, potentially leading to greater damage and missed opportunities for effective remediation. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response framework that prioritizes evidence preservation alongside containment and eradication. This involves establishing clear protocols for handling security incidents, including steps for data acquisition, chain of custody, and forensic analysis. When faced with a compromise, the decision-making process should involve assessing the criticality of the affected systems, the potential for data loss or exfiltration, and the need for forensic investigation. A phased approach, starting with containment and evidence collection before proceeding to eradication and recovery, ensures that all necessary steps are taken to address the incident effectively and compliantly. Question 4. The investigation demonstrates that a critical server has been compromised, exhibiting unusual network traffic and unauthorized file modifications. The immediate business impact is significant, with services being disrupted. The incident response team is under pressure to restore functionality as quickly as possible to minimize financial losses. What is the most appropriate initial action to take to ensure both rapid recovery and thorough forensic investigation, adhering to U.S. cybersecurity principles and best practices? Option A. Create forensically sound images of the affected server's disks and memory before any other recovery or remediation actions are taken. Option B. Wipe the affected server's hard drives and reinstall the operating system and applications from scratch. Option C. Disconnect the affected server from the network to prevent further unauthorized access, and then proceed with manual analysis of logs. Option D. Immediately reboot the affected server and initiate a full system restore from the most recent clean backup. Correct answer is D. Immediately reboot the affected server and initiate a full system restore from the most recent clean backup. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the legal and ethical obligations to preserve evidence. The pressure to restore services quickly can lead to actions that inadvertently compromise the integrity of forensic data, hindering subsequent investigations and potentially violating compliance requirements. The professional challenge lies in making informed decisions under duress, understanding the long-term implications of immediate actions, and adhering to established protocols even when they seem to slow down recovery. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the preservation of digital evidence according to established forensic best practices and relevant U.S. regulatory frameworks, such as those outlined by NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, guidelines, which are foundational for many U.S. cybersecurity compliance efforts. This involves creating forensically sound images of affected systems before making any modifications or attempting recovery. This ensures that the original state of the compromised systems is captured, allowing for thorough analysis without altering the evidence. This aligns with the principles of evidence integrity, crucial for legal proceedings, internal investigations, and demonstrating compliance with regulations like HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, if applicable to the organization's sector, which mandate proper data handling and security incident response. Correct approaches analysis. Immediately rebooting or wiping the affected systems without creating forensic images represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action destroys volatile data, like RAM contents, and alters the state of the system, making it impossible to conduct a thorough forensic analysis. This directly violates the principles of evidence preservation and can lead to noncompliance with data breach notification laws, e.g., state-specific breach laws, that require accurate reporting of the incident's scope and cause. Furthermore, it undermines the organization's ability to identify the root cause, prevent future occurrences, and potentially pursue legal recourse against attackers. Attempting to restore from backups without first imaging the compromised systems is also problematic. While backups are essential for recovery, restoring directly can overwrite critical forensic data that might still exist on the compromised systems. This again compromises the integrity of the investigation and can lead to regulatory noncompliance by failing to adequately investigate the incident. Disabling network connectivity to the affected systems without documenting the state of the systems or creating images is a partial step, but insufficient. While it contains the spread, it doesn't preserve the evidence on the compromised machines themselves, leaving the investigation incomplete and potentially violating compliance requirements for thorough incident response. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response methodology that integrates forensic preservation from the outset. This involves 1. Identification and triage. Quickly assess the situation to understand the scope and impact. 2. Containment. Implement measures to prevent further damage or spread. 3. Eradication. Remove the threat. 4. Recovery. Restore systems to normal operation. 5. Lessons learned. Analyze the incident to improve defenses. Crucially, forensic preservation imaging should occur as early as possible, ideally during the containment phase, before any actions that could alter the evidence are taken. This ensures that all subsequent steps are based on a complete and untainted dataset, satisfying both operational needs and legal/regulatory obligations. Professionals must be trained in forensic best practices and understand the legal ramifications of mishandling digital evidence. Question 5. Upon reviewing security logs, a cybersecurity analyst detects unusual outbound traffic patterns from a sensitive customer database server, suggesting a potential data exfiltration event. The organization handles personally identifiable information, PI, for U.S.-based customers. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and mitigate risk? Option A. Immediately initiate the organization's formal incident response plan, including engaging legal counsel to assess regulatory obligations and guide the investigation and notification process. Option B. Delay any external communication or internal reporting until a thorough forensic investigation can definitively prove data exfiltration, to avoid unnecessary panic. Option C. Promptly notify all affected customers via email to inform them of the potential data compromise and advise them to monitor their accounts. Option D. Immediately attempt to block all outbound traffic from the affected server to contain the suspected exfiltration, without further investigation or consultation. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate the organization's formal incident response plan, including engaging legal counsel to assess regulatory obligations and guide the investigation and notification process. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the imperative of adhering to regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in the potential for immediate, albeit potentially non-compliant, actions to mitigate a perceived threat versus the slower, more deliberate, but legally sound approach. The pressure to act quickly in the face of a potential data breach can lead to shortcuts that violate established protocols and legal frameworks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the established regulatory framework, specifically the U.S. federal laws governing data breach notification and privacy, such as HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. If health information is involved, or other relevant state-specific data breach notification laws. By initiating the internal incident response plan and engaging legal counsel, the organization ensures that any subsequent actions, including notification, are conducted in a manner that meets legal requirements, minimizes liability, and protects the rights of affected individuals. This proactive engagement with legal experts is crucial for navigating the complex legal landscape of data breaches. An incorrect approach that involves immediately notifying affected individuals without proper investigation or legal consultation is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a direct violation of data breach notification laws, which often mandate specific timelines, content, and methods for notification. Such premature notification can lead to legal penalties, fines, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, such as delaying notification to avoid negative publicity or internal repercussions, is also a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This delay can exacerbate the harm to individuals whose data has been compromised and can result in severe legal consequences for the organization, as many regulations impose strict deadlines for notification. Furthermore, attempting to conceal the breach or its extent is a severe ethical and legal transgression, undermining trust and potentially leading to criminal charges. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process when faced with a potential data breach. This process should begin with activating the organization's incident response plan, which typically includes steps for containment, eradication, and recovery. Crucially, it must involve immediate consultation with legal counsel to understand the specific regulatory obligations based on the type of data compromised and the affected individual's locations. This ensures that all subsequent actions, including forensic investigation, evidence preservation, and notification, are conducted in a legally defensible manner. Prioritizing transparency and compliance, even under pressure, is paramount for maintaining organizational integrity and mitigating long-term risks. Question 6. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in security incidents over the past quarter, with a significant portion attributed to unauthorized access attempts. Which of the following actions best aligns with the requirements for implementing Cisco cybersecurity operations within a U.S. regulated environment, focusing on incident response and regulatory compliance? Option A. Initiate a detailed incident response plan, including evidence preservation, root cause analysis, and timely reporting to relevant stakeholders and regulatory bodies as required by applicable U.S. laws and frameworks. Option B. Focus solely on patching all identified system vulnerabilities without conducting a thorough investigation into the specific attack vectors used. Option C. Continue with routine security monitoring and maintenance tasks, deferring a detailed investigation of the increased incident rate until the next scheduled review. Option D. Immediately block all external network access to prevent further unauthorized attempts, regardless of potential business impact. Correct answer is A. Initiate a detailed incident response plan, including evidence preservation, root cause analysis, and timely reporting to relevant stakeholders and regulatory bodies as required by applicable U.S. laws and frameworks. Explanation: the performance metrics show a consistent increase in security incidents over the past quarter, with a significant portion attributed to unauthorized access attempts. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a cybersecurity analyst to not only identify the technical root cause, but also to ensure that the organization's response aligns with its regulatory obligations. The analyst must balance the urgency of remediation with the need for thorough documentation and reporting, all while adhering to the specific legal and compliance frameworks applicable to the organization's operating jurisdiction. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and documented investigation that directly addresses the observed performance metrics. By initiating a detailed incident response plan, including evidence preservation and root cause analysis, the analyst ensures that the organization can effectively mitigate the current threat and prevent future occurrences. This methodical approach is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and compliance with regulatory requirements, such as those mandated by the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, Cybersecurity Framework, which emphasizes incident response and recovery. Furthermore, timely and accurate reporting to relevant stakeholders and regulatory bodies, as dictated by applicable laws like the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, if patient data is involved, is a critical component of maintaining trust and avoiding penalties. An incorrect approach that involves immediately blocking all external access without proper investigation is professionally unacceptable. This is because it can disrupt legitimate business operations, leading to financial losses and potential non-compliance with service-level agreements. Ethically, it fails to consider the impact on users and business continuity. From a regulatory standpoint, such a broad action might violate data protection regulations if it inadvertently restricts access to necessary services or data for authorized individuals. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on patching systems without understanding the attack vector, is also professionally flawed. While patching is important, it doesn't address the immediate threat or the underlying vulnerabilities that allow the unauthorized access. This can lead to a false sense of security and leave the organization exposed to similar attacks. It fails to meet the investigative and reporting requirements of many cybersecurity regulations, which demand a comprehensive understanding of the incident. A third incorrect approach, which is to ignore the performance metrics and continue with routine tasks, is the most egregious failure. This demonstrates a lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for organizational security. It directly violates the ethical obligation to protect organizational assets and data. From a regulatory perspective, this inaction could lead to severe penalties if an incident escalates and it is discovered that known indicators of compromise were ignored, violating requirements for proactive security monitoring and incident response. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured incident response methodology. This begins with identification and assessment of the incident, followed by containment, eradication, and recovery. Crucially, throughout this process, evidence must be preserved and detailed documentation maintained. Reporting obligations must be identified early and fulfilled promptly. This systematic approach ensures that technical remediation is effective, business impact is minimized, and all legal and regulatory requirements are met. Question 7. Examination of the data shows a misconfiguration in a cloud storage bucket has led to the inadvertent exposure of sensitive customer personally identifiable information, PI. The Security Operations Center, SOC, has confirmed the exposure and identified the root cause. What is the most appropriate immediate next step for the SOC team to take, considering U.S. federal and state data breach notification laws? Option A. Immediately initiate the process of notifying all affected customers and relevant state attorneys' general offices, while simultaneously working with the cloud provider to secure the data. Option B. Begin drafting a public relations statement to manage reputational damage before notifying any regulatory bodies or affected individuals. Option C. Inform only the internal legal and executive teams about the breach and await their direction on external communications. Option D. Focus solely on securing the misconfigured cloud storage bucket and resolving the technical issue before any external communication. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate the process of notifying all affected customers and relevant state attorneys' general offices, while simultaneously working with the cloud provider to secure the data. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, where a security team discovers sensitive customer data has been inadvertently exposed due to a misconfiguration. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to contain the breach, protect affected individuals, and comply with stringent data privacy regulations, all while maintaining operational integrity and stakeholder trust. The pressure to act quickly without compromising thoroughness or legal obligations makes this a high-stakes situation requiring careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic process that prioritizes notification and remediation in accordance with applicable regulations. This includes immediately assessing the scope and impact of the exposure, securing the compromised systems to prevent further data loss, and then promptly notifying the relevant regulatory bodies and affected individuals as mandated by law. This aligns with the principles of data protection and breach notification requirements, ensuring transparency and accountability. For instance, in the U.S. context, regulations like HIPAA for health information or state-specific data breach notification laws would dictate specific timelines and content for notifications. The focus is on minimizing harm to individuals and demonstrating a commitment to regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to delay notification to regulatory bodies and affected individuals while attempting to fully resolve the technical issue. This failure to adhere to mandated notification timelines constitutes a significant regulatory violation. Many data privacy laws impose strict deadlines for reporting breaches, and exceeding these can result in substantial fines and legal repercussions. Ethically, this approach prioritizes the organization's reputation over the rights and safety of individuals whose data has been compromised, potentially leaving them vulnerable to identity theft or other harms without timely warning. Another incorrect approach is to only notify regulatory bodies without informing the affected individuals. A regulatory notification is crucial. Failing to inform individuals whose personal data has been exposed is a direct violation of their right to know and a breach of trust. This can lead to severe reputational damage and further legal penalties, as many regulations explicitly require notification to the data subjects. It demonstrates a lack of ethical consideration for the individuals impacted by the breach. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to conceal the breach or downplay its severity to stakeholders. This is not only ethically reprehensible, but also a direct contravention of transparency requirements often embedded in regulatory frameworks. Such actions can lead to severe legal consequences, including charges of obstruction or misrepresentation, and will irrevocably damage stakeholder trust. It prioritizes short-term damage control over long-term integrity and compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response plan that incorporates regulatory compliance from the outset. This involves establishing clear communication channels with legal counsel and regulatory affairs teams. The decision-making process should prioritize 1. Containment and eradication of the threat. 2. Assessment of the data impacted and the individuals affected. 3. Consultation with legal experts to determine precise notification obligations under relevant laws. 4. Timely and transparent communication with both regulatory bodies and affected individuals. This systematic approach ensures that all legal and ethical obligations are met, minimizing potential harm and fostering trust. Question 8. Performance analysis shows a potential security incident involving a web server that hosts customer data. Initial alerts indicate unusual outbound network traffic, but it is unclear if sensitive customer information has been exfiltrated. The organization operates under U.S. federal regulations that mandate specific breach notification timelines and requirements. Which of the following actions best balances immediate security needs with regulatory compliance? Option A. Isolate the affected web server from the network to prevent further potential exfiltration while simultaneously launching a detailed forensic investigation to determine the scope and nature of any data compromise, and prepare for notification if exfiltration is confirmed. Option B. Conduct a rapid, focused investigation to confirm or deny the exfiltration of sensitive customer data before implementing containment measures or initiating any notification procedures. Option C. Immediately initiate full system containment and begin the formal breach notification process to all affected customers and relevant regulatory bodies, assuming exfiltration has occurred. Option D. Temporarily disable all external network access for the entire organization to prevent any possible data leakage, and then wait for a comprehensive security audit to be completed before considering any notification. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate full system containment and begin the formal breach notification process to all affected customers and relevant regulatory bodies, assuming exfiltration has occurred. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the imperative of adhering to regulatory compliance. The pressure to quickly contain a potential data breach, coupled with the ambiguity of whether sensitive data was actually exfiltrated, creates a high-stakes environment where hasty decisions can have significant legal and financial repercussions. The professional challenge lies in making an informed judgment call that satisfies both immediate security needs and long-term regulatory obligations without overreacting or underreacting. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased response that prioritizes evidence preservation and regulatory notification based on a reasoned assessment of risk. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible data handling mandated by cybersecurity regulations. By initiating containment measures while simultaneously conducting a thorough investigation to confirm data exfiltration, security professionals demonstrate a commitment to both operational security and regulatory adherence. The subsequent notification, triggered by confirmed exfiltration, ensures compliance with breach notification laws, which typically require timely reporting to affected individuals and regulatory bodies. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of both regulatory penalties for non-compliance and reputational damage from a mishandled incident. Incorrect approach is analysis. Immediately reporting a potential breach without confirming data exfiltration, while seemingly cautious, can lead to unnecessary panic, resource misallocation, and potential regulatory scrutiny for unsubstantiated claims. This approach fails to uphold the principle of proportionality in incident response and can erode trust with regulatory bodies and stakeholders. Conversely, delaying containment and investigation until absolute certainty of exfiltration is achieved, or opting for a complete system shutdown without a clear understanding of the scope and impact, risks further data compromise and significant operational disruption. Such inaction or overly broad measures can violate regulatory requirements for timely incident response and data protection. Failing to document the investigation process thoroughly also undermines accountability and can hinder future audits or legal proceedings. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, evidence-driven approach to incident response. This involves establishing clear protocols for incident classification, investigation, containment, eradication, and recovery. When faced with a potential breach, the decision-making process should involve 1. Initial assessment to determine the potential severity and scope. 2. Evidence preservation to support investigation. 3. Targeted containment measures to limit further damage. 4. Thorough investigation to confirm the nature and impact of the incident, including data exfiltration. 5. Timely and accurate notification to relevant parties based on confirmed findings and regulatory requirements. Documentation at each stage is crucial for accountability and compliance. Question 9. System analysis indicates a critical security incident involving a potential exfiltration of sensitive customer data. The incident response team is under immense pressure to contain the breach and restore services immediately. Which of the following actions best aligns with regulatory compliance requirements for handling such an incident in a U.S.-based organization? Option A. Immediately isolate affected systems, preserve all logs and forensic images of affected devices, and consult with legal counsel to determine notification obligations based on the nature of the compromised data. Option B. Prioritize system restoration by wiping affected servers and reinstalling operating systems to ensure a clean environment, then address data exfiltration concerns later. Option C. Proceed with immediate service restoration without extensive data preservation, assuming that any lost logs can be reconstructed or are not critical for compliance. Option D. Conduct a broad scan of all customer databases to identify the full extent of the breach, copying all potentially affected data to a secure staging server for analysis. The correct answer is A. Immediately isolate affected systems, preserve all logs and forensic images of affected devices, and consult with legal counsel to determine notification obligations based on the nature of the compromised data. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the imperative of adhering to regulatory compliance frameworks. The pressure to contain a breach quickly can lead to hasty decisions that may inadvertently violate data privacy regulations, such as those governing the handling of personally identifiable information, PI. The professional challenge lies in executing effective incident response while maintaining a meticulous record of actions taken and ensuring that all steps align with legal and ethical obligations, particularly concerning data protection. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the preservation of evidence and adherence to established incident response procedures that incorporate regulatory requirements. This involves documenting all actions, including data access and modification, in a manner that is auditable and compliant with relevant regulations. For example, if the incident involves PII, the response must be guided by principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, and lawful processing, as mandated by regulations like GDPR, if applicable to the exam's jurisdiction, which is assumed to be U.S.-centric for CCNA cyber ops unless otherwise specified. This approach ensures that the organization not only mitigates the immediate threat, but also avoids further legal repercussions and maintains stakeholder trust by demonstrating responsible data stewardship. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach that focuses solely on immediate system restoration without adequate documentation or consideration for data privacy risks regulatory noncompliance. For instance, deleting or overriding logs to clean up the system, even with good intentions, can be a direct violation of data retention and evidence preservation requirements. This action hinders forensic analysis and can be interpreted as obstruction of an investigation, leading to significant penalties. Another incorrect approach involves broad data collection or analysis without a clear legal basis or defined scope. This could involve accessing or copying sensitive data beyond what is strictly necessary for incident containment and investigation, potentially violating privacy laws and exceeding authorized access. Such actions can lead to accusations of unauthorized data access and misuse. Finally, an approach that delays reporting or notification to relevant authorities or affected individuals beyond mandated timelines, even if the technical response is swift, can also lead to regulatory penalties. Many data breach notification laws have strict timeframes for reporting, and failure to comply can result in fines and reputational damage. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cybersecurity operations must adopt a proactive and compliant mindset. This involves understanding the relevant regulatory landscape, e.g., HIPAA, CCPA, NIST frameworks for U.S.-based operations, and integrating these requirements into incident response plans. A structured decision-making process should include 1. Immediate containment and eradication, 2. Thorough documentation of all actions and findings, 3. Assessment of data impact and regulatory obligations, 4. Timely and accurate reporting, and 5. Post-incident review and improvement. This systematic approach ensures that technical efficacy is achieved without compromising legal and ethical responsibilities. Question 10. Analysis of a cybersecurity incident response scenario where a critical server is suspected of being compromised by ransomware. The Security Operations Center (SOC) team has identified unusual outbound network traffic and encrypted files on the server. The primary goal is to contain the threat and restore services as quickly as possible, while also ensuring that any actions taken do not jeopardize potential legal or regulatory investigations. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory compliance and professional best practices for incident response in this situation? Option A. Initiate an immediate system wipe and reformat of the compromised server to ensure no further malicious activity can occur, and then restore from the latest known good backup. Option B. Immediately disconnect the affected server from the network, create a forensic image of its storage devices, and then proceed with eradication and recovery procedures on a clean system. Option C. Begin encrypting all other servers on the network to match the ransomware's behavior and confuse the attacker, while simultaneously attempting to decrypt the affected files. Option D. Share the raw, unanalyzed log files from the compromised server with all employees to raise awareness about the attack vector. The correct answer is B. Immediately disconnect the affected server from the network, create a forensic image of its storage devices, and then proceed with eradication and recovery procedures on a clean system. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the imperative of adhering to regulatory compliance frameworks. The professional challenge lies in the potential for immediate data exfiltration or system compromise to necessitate swift action, which could inadvertently lead to the destruction or alteration of evidence crucial for forensic analysis and subsequent legal or regulatory proceedings. The pressure to contain and eradicate can conflict with the requirement to preserve data integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the preservation of evidence in a forensically sound manner, aligning with the principles of incident response and digital forensics as often mandated or implied by regulatory frameworks. By isolating the affected systems without altering their state and documenting all actions meticulously, the security team ensures that any subsequent investigation, whether internal or external, can be conducted with reliable data. This proactive approach minimizes the risk of legal repercussions, regulatory fines, and reputational damage that could arise from compromised evidence. An incorrect approach that involves immediately wiping or reformatting affected systems before a proper forensic image is acquired would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action would likely violate data preservation requirements stipulated by various regulations, e.g., those pertaining to data breach notification, financial reporting, or healthcare privacy, depending on the industry context. Though for this exam, we focus on general principles applicable to U.S. frameworks. It would also be an ethical breach as it obstructs a thorough investigation and potentially shields malicious actors. Another incorrect approach, such as sharing raw, unanalyzed log data with external parties without proper sanitization or legal authorization, could lead to privacy violations and noncompliance with data protection laws, exposing sensitive information and creating further legal liabilities. Finally, an approach that delays reporting a confirmed breach to relevant authorities beyond mandated timelines, even if the investigation is ongoing, would be a direct violation of notification requirements, leading to penalties. The professional reasoning process should involve a tiered approach to incident response. First, immediate containment is crucial, but this must be done in a way that minimizes data alteration. This means isolating systems, not necessarily destroying them. Second, evidence preservation is paramount. This involves creating forensically sound images of affected systems and collecting logs in a secure and documented manner. Third, thorough analysis of the collected evidence should guide further remediation and reporting. Fourth, all actions must be meticulously documented, creating an audit trail. Finally, communication with relevant stakeholders, including legal counsel and regulatory bodies, should be timely and transparent, adhering to all reporting obligations. Question 11. Cost-benefit analysis shows that the proposed comprehensive security solution to mitigate a critical identified risk significantly exceeds the allocated budget. However, the risk itself, if realized, could lead to substantial financial penalties and reputational damage. What is the most appropriate next step for the cybersecurity operations team? Option A. Implement a basic, low-cost security measure that addresses only a fraction of the identified risk to stay within budget, without further analysis. Option B. Conduct a deeper dive into the risk assessment to identify potential alternative, less expensive mitigation strategies or a phased implementation approach, and re-engage stakeholders to discuss risk tolerance and potential compromises. Option C. Recommend accepting the risk without implementing any new controls, citing budget limitations as the primary reason. Option D. Proceed with the most expensive solution regardless of budget constraints, as the potential impact of the risk is too severe to ignore. The correct answer is B. Conduct a deeper dive into the risk assessment to identify potential alternative, less expensive mitigation strategies or a phased implementation approach, and re-engage stakeholders to discuss risk tolerance and potential compromises. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for robust security with resource constraints. The organization has identified a significant risk, but the proposed mitigation strategy is expensive. The professional challenge lies in making a justifiable decision that aligns with both business objectives and regulatory compliance without overspending or leaving the organization unduly exposed. The decision requires a nuanced understanding of risk appetite, the potential impact of the threat, and the effectiveness of various mitigation options. The correct approach involves a thorough reevaluation of the risk assessment, focusing on the likelihood and impact of the identified threat in the context of the organization's specific environment and existing controls. This includes exploring alternative, less costly mitigation strategies that might offer a comparable level of risk reduction. It also necessitates engaging stakeholders to understand the organization's risk tolerance and to secure buy-in for the chosen path. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring that security investments are proportionate to the risk and that decisions are data-driven and strategically aligned. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the mitigation due to cost without exploring alternatives or understanding the full implications of the risk. This could lead to a failure to adequately protect sensitive data or critical systems, potentially violating regulatory requirements for data protection and incident response. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a cheaper, less effective solution simply to meet a budget, without a proper assessment of its residual risk. This could be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence and could expose the organization to significant liability if a breach occurs. Ethically, professionals have a duty to protect their organization's assets and data, which includes making informed decisions about security investments. The professional decision-making process should involve 1. Confirming the accuracy and completeness of the initial risk assessment. 2. Investigating a range of mitigation options, considering their cost, effectiveness, and implementation complexity. 3. Quantifying the potential impact of the risk, including financial, reputational, and regulatory consequences. 4. Consulting with relevant stakeholders, including IT, legal, and business unit leaders, to understand risk appetite and operational constraints. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale for the chosen mitigation strategy. Question 12. Governance review demonstrates that the cybersecurity operations team has identified a wide range of vulnerabilities across various systems. To effectively allocate limited resources for remediation and mitigation, which of the following approaches best aligns with established U.S. cybersecurity risk management principles and regulatory expectations for prioritizing these identified risks? Option A. Prioritize vulnerabilities based on how recently the vulnerability was discovered or how new the threat appears to be. Option B. Prioritize vulnerabilities solely based on the total number of vulnerabilities found on each system, addressing systems with the highest count first. Option C. Prioritize vulnerabilities based on a combination of the likelihood of a threat exploiting the vulnerability and the potential business impact if the vulnerability is exploited. Option D. Prioritize vulnerabilities based on the lowest cost of remediation, regardless of the potential impact or likelihood of exploitation. The correct answer is C. Prioritize vulnerabilities based on a combination of the likelihood of a threat exploiting the vulnerability and the potential business impact if the vulnerability is exploited. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for comprehensive risk assessment with the practical constraints of limited resources and time. The professionally challenging aspect lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method for prioritizing risks when faced with a broad spectrum of potential threats and vulnerabilities. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen approach aligns with regulatory expectations and ethical responsibilities, particularly in a U.S. context where compliance frameworks like NIST are highly influential. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core principles of risk management, as outlined in frameworks like NIST SB 800-30. By focusing on the likelihood of a threat exploiting a vulnerability and the potential impact on the organization, it provides a structured and quantifiable basis for prioritization. This method ensures that resources are allocated to address the most significant risks first, thereby maximizing the effectiveness of security investments and demonstrating due diligence to regulatory bodies. It aligns with the ethical obligation to protect organizational assets and sensitive data. An incorrect approach that solely relies on the number of vulnerabilities identified fails to consider the potential impact or likelihood of exploitation. This is a regulatory failure because it does not demonstrate a risk-based approach, which is a cornerstone of most U.S. cybersecurity regulations and compliance standards. It can lead to misallocation of resources, addressing low-impact issues while neglecting critical threats. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes risks based on the perceived novelty of the threat is ethically problematic and a regulatory failure. Novelty is subjective and does not inherently correlate with actual risk. This approach can lead to overlooking well-understood but highly impactful threats, failing to protect the organization adequately, and potentially violating due care principles. A further incorrect approach that focuses only on the cost of remediation without considering the risk level is also a significant failure. While cost is a factor in resource allocation, it should not be the primary driver for risk prioritization. This can lead to underfunding the mitigation of high-impact risks if their remediation is expensive, or overspending on low-impact risks if their remediation is cheap. This demonstrates a lack of strategic risk management and can be seen as a failure to meet the duty of care expected by regulatory bodies. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic risk assessment methodology. This includes identifying assets, threats, and vulnerabilities, analyzing the likelihood and impact of potential incidents, evaluating existing controls, and then prioritizing risks based on a defined risk matrix or scoring system. Professionals should consult relevant regulatory frameworks, e.g., NIST, CMMC if applicable, and organizational policies to ensure their chosen methodology is compliant and effective. Continuous monitoring and reassessment are also crucial to adapt to evolving threat landscapes. Question 13. Research into the most effective method for a cybersecurity operations team to initiate a comprehensive risk assessment for a newly acquired subsidiary, considering the need to quickly integrate its IT infrastructure while ensuring compliance with internal security policies and industry best practices. Option A. Immediately implement the parent company's standard security controls across all of the subsidiary systems to ensure immediate baseline protection. Option B. Conduct a thorough inventory of all IT assets, identify all potential threat actors and attack vectors relevant to the subsidiary's industry, and then systematically document existing vulnerabilities through a combination of automated scanning and manual penetration testing. Option C. Focus on gathering publicly available information about the subsidiary's IT infrastructure and any known past security incidents. Option D. Rely primarily on the subsidiary's existing documentation and self-reported security posture to gauge its risk level. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough inventory of all IT assets, identify all potential threat actors and attack vectors relevant to the subsidiary's industry, and then systematically document existing vulnerabilities through a combination of automated scanning and manual penetration testing. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for comprehensive risk assessment with the practical constraints of limited resources and time. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and efficient method to gather the necessary information for a meaningful risk assessment, ensuring that critical vulnerabilities are not overlooked while avoiding analysis paralysis. The chosen approach must align with established cybersecurity best practices and, where applicable, regulatory expectations for due diligence in protecting sensitive data. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured and systematic methodology for risk assessment. By focusing on identifying critical assets, potential threats, and existing vulnerabilities, it provides a foundational understanding of the organization's risk landscape. This systematic process ensures that the assessment is comprehensive, repeatable, and defensible. It allows for the prioritization of risks based on their potential impact and likelihood, enabling informed decision-making regarding mitigation strategies. This aligns with the principles of due diligence expected in cybersecurity operations, aiming to proactively identify and address potential security weaknesses before they can be exploited. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on readily available information without a structured methodology fails to adequately identify all potential risks. This can lead to a false sense of security, as critical vulnerabilities that are not immediately apparent might be missed. This oversight can result in regulatory noncompliance if the organization is found to have not exercised reasonable care in protecting data or systems, potentially leading to fines or reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that involves an overly broad and unfocused data collection effort without clear objectives is inefficient and can lead to overwhelming amounts of irrelevant data. This boil-the-ocean strategy wastes valuable resources and time, delaying the identification of actionable risks. Professionally, this demonstrates a lack of strategic thinking and an inability to prioritize effectively, which can hinder the organization's ability to respond to evolving threats. A professional decision-making process for similar situations involves several key steps. First, clearly define the scope and objectives of the risk assessment. Second, identify the critical assets and data that need protection. Third, select an appropriate risk assessment methodology that aligns with the organization's resources and the criticality of the assets. Fourth, gather relevant information systematically, prioritizing data sources that are most likely to reveal significant risks. Fifth, analyze the gathered information to identify and prioritize risks. Finally, develop and implement appropriate mitigation strategies and continuously monitor the effectiveness of these controls. This iterative process ensures that risk management is an ongoing activity, not a one-time event. Question 14. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood, high-impact threat related to unpatched critical vulnerabilities on internet-facing servers, a medium likelihood, high-impact threat concerning insider data exfiltration via social engineering, and a low likelihood, low-impact threat involving a phishing campaign targeting non-critical internal systems. Which course of action best aligns with a proactive and effective cybersecurity posture? Option A. Focus solely on addressing the phishing campaign as it is the easiest to mitigate. Option B. Prioritize the remediation of the unpatched critical vulnerabilities on internet-facing servers, as this represents the most immediate and severe threat to the organization's core operations and data integrity. Option C. Allocate resources to investigate the low likelihood, low-impact phishing campaign and the medium likelihood, high-impact insider threat, while deferring patching of critical vulnerabilities. Option D. Immediately deploy patches to all internet-facing servers and develop enhanced training modules for employees on social engineering awareness. The correct answer is D. Immediately deploy patches to all internet-facing servers and develop enhanced training modules for employees on social engineering awareness. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, prioritizing remediation efforts when faced with multiple identified risks. The professional challenge lies in effectively translating the qualitative and quantitative data from a risk assessment into actionable security improvements that align with organizational objectives and regulatory compliance. A key aspect is understanding that a risk matrix is a tool for visualization and prioritization, not a definitive solution in itself. The correct approach involves using the risk matrix to identify the highest priority risks, which are typically those with a high likelihood of occurrence and a high potential impact. This aligns with best professional practice by focusing resources where they will have the greatest effect in reducing overall organizational risk. From a regulatory perspective, this proactive and prioritized approach demonstrates due diligence in managing information security risks, which is often a requirement under various data protection and cybersecurity frameworks. It ensures that the organization is not only addressing threats, but doing so in a manner that is both efficient and effective. thereby safeguarding sensitive data and maintaining operational continuity. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the risk matrix entirely and focus on risks that are merely the easiest to fix. This fails to address the most significant threats to the organization, potentially leaving it vulnerable to severe breaches or operational disruption. Ethically, this demonstrates a lack of commitment to protecting organizational assets and stakeholder data. Another incorrect approach is to solely focus on risks with the highest potential impact, regardless of their likelihood. While high impact is critical, ignoring low likelihood, high-impact risks might lead to misallocation of resources if the probability of occurrence is astronomically low, diverting attention from more immediate and probable threats. This can also be seen as a failure in due diligence if it leads to overlooking significant, albeit less probable, risks that could still materialize. A further incorrect approach is to address risks based on the order they were discovered, without reference to the risk matrix. This is a reactive and haphazard method that does not guarantee that the most critical vulnerabilities are being mitigated, leading to inefficient use of security resources and potentially leaving the organization exposed to its most significant threats. A professional decision-making process should involve understanding the context of the risk assessment, including the organization's risk appetite and tolerance. Professionals should use the risk matrix as a guide to initiate discussions with stakeholders about the identified risks and potential mitigation strategies. This collaborative approach ensures that remediation efforts are aligned with business objectives and that the chosen strategies are practical and sustainable. The process should also include a feedback loop to continuously monitor the effectiveness of implemented controls and reassess risks as the threat landscape evolves. Question 15. The audit findings indicate that the organization's current cybersecurity posture may not adequately address emerging threats, leading to a potential increase in the attack surface. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate next step to systematically improve the organization's risk management framework? Option A. Focus solely on patching known vulnerabilities identified in the audit report, assuming this will mitigate all potential risks. Option B. Postpone any further security initiatives until a new, more robust compliance standard is officially mandated by regulatory bodies. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive risk assessment process to identify, analyze, and evaluate the organization's specific vulnerabilities and potential threats. Option D. Immediately deploy a suite of advanced security technologies across all network segments to bolster defenses against unknown threats. The correct answer is C. Initiate a comprehensive risk assessment process to identify, analyze, and evaluate the organization's specific vulnerabilities and potential threats. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for comprehensive risk assessment with the practical constraints of limited resources and time. The audit findings highlight a potential gap in understanding the organization's threat landscape and its susceptibility to various cyber threats. A professionally challenging aspect is determining the most effective and efficient method to address this gap without causing undue disruption or overspending. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both thorough and actionable. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the audit findings by initiating a structured process to identify, analyze, and evaluate risks. This aligns with the fundamental principles of cybersecurity risk management, which are often implicitly or explicitly supported by regulatory frameworks and industry best practices aimed at protecting sensitive information and ensuring operational continuity. By focusing on the organization's specific assets, threats, and vulnerabilities, this method ensures that mitigation efforts are prioritized and resources are allocated effectively to address the most critical risks. This proactive stance is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and compliance with general security obligations. An incorrect approach that involves immediately implementing broad, untested security controls without a proper risk assessment is professionally unacceptable. This fails to adhere to the principle of risk-based security, leading to inefficient resource allocation and potentially introducing new vulnerabilities through poorly implemented solutions. It also represents a failure to understand and address the root cause identified by the audit, potentially leading to repeated findings in future audits. Furthermore, it may violate ethical obligations to manage organizational resources responsibly and could be seen as non-compliant with any regulatory requirements that mandate a reasoned, risk-informed approach to security investments. Another incorrect approach, such as deferring the risk assessment due to perceived complexity or cost, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to security and an unwillingness to address identified weaknesses. It exposes the organization to potentially significant harm from cyber threats that are not understood or managed. Ethically, it represents a dereliction of duty to protect organizational assets and data. From a regulatory perspective, it could be interpreted as negligence, especially if a breach occurs due to unaddressed risks. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the audit findings, understanding the underlying risks, and then selecting the most appropriate methodology for risk assessment. This involves considering the organization's size, industry, data sensitivity, and regulatory environment. Professionals should prioritize approaches that are scalable, repeatable, and provide actionable insights. The decision-making framework should emphasize a risk-based approach, ensuring that security measures are proportionate to the identified risks and aligned with business objectives. Continuous monitoring and reevaluation of risks are also integral to this process. Question 16. Which approach would be most effective for a cybersecurity operations team to initially assess the risk posture of a new cloud-based CRM system, considering practical resource limitations? Option A. Perform a purely quantitative risk assessment, assigning precise monetary values to all potential losses and calculating exact probabilities of occurrence. Option B. Implement an ad hoc, unstructured risk identification process where team members document risks as they are encountered. Option C. Focus exclusively on identifying all technical vulnerabilities within the CRM system without considering business impact or likelihood. Option D. Conduct a qualitative risk assessment by identifying threats, vulnerabilities, and potential impacts, assigning subjective likelihood and impact ratings. The correct answer is D. Conduct a qualitative risk assessment by identifying threats, vulnerabilities, and potential impacts, assigning subjective likelihood and impact ratings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. A cybersecurity operations team is tasked with assessing the risk associated with a new cloud-based customer relationship management (CRM) system. The challenge lies in balancing the need for comprehensive risk identification with the practical constraints of time and resources. Without a structured approach, the assessment could become unfocused, leading to missed critical vulnerabilities or an overwhelming amount of data that hinders effective decision-making. Professional judgment is required to select a methodology that is both thorough and efficient, ensuring that the organization can make informed decisions about security control and resource allocation. Correct approach analysis. Employing a qualitative risk assessment methodology, which involves identifying threats, vulnerabilities, and potential impacts, and then assigning subjective ratings e.g., high, medium, low to likelihood and impact, represents best professional practice. This approach is aligned with general cybersecurity best practices and is implicitly supported by frameworks like NIST SB 800-30, which is a foundational guide for risk assessments in U.S. federal agencies and widely adopted in the private sector. It allows for a rapid yet effective understanding of the risk landscape, enabling prioritization of mitigation efforts without requiring extensive quantitative data that may not be readily available or necessary for initial decision-making. This aligns with the principle of proportionality in security, focusing resources where they are most needed. Incorrect approach is analysis. Choosing to perform a purely quantitative risk assessment without sufficient historical data or the ability to assign precise monetary values to assets and losses would be a regulatory and ethical failure. This approach, while aiming for objectivity, can lead to inaccurate conclusions if the underlying data is speculative or unavailable, potentially misallocating resources or creating a false sense of security. Fails to meet the practical needs of a timely assessment and could be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence if it leads to underestimation of risks due to data gaps. Opting for an ad hoc, unstructured approach where team members identify risks as they come to mind, without a defined framework or methodology, represents a significant ethical and professional failure. This method lacks consistency, is prone to bias, and is highly likely to miss critical risks. It demonstrates a lack of professional rigor and could lead to significant security breaches, violating the organization's duty of care to protect sensitive data and systems. Such an approach would not stand up to any form of regulatory scrutiny or audit. Focusing solely on identifying technical vulnerabilities without considering the business impact or the likelihood of exploitation would also be an inadequate and professionally unsound approach. This narrow focus ignores the broader context of risk management, which requires understanding how technical issues translate into business disruptions or financial losses. It fails to provide a holistic view of risk, potentially leading to the implementation of controls that do not address the most significant threats to the organization's objectives. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by first understanding the scope and objectives of the assessment. They should then select a methodology that is appropriate for the context, considering available resources, time constraints, and the criticality of the asset or system being assessed. A qualitative approach is often a good starting point for understanding the relative severity of risks. The process should involve clearly defined steps for threat identification, vulnerability analysis, impact assessment, and risk evaluation. Finally, the findings should be communicated clearly to stakeholders to support informed decision-making regarding risk mitigation strategies. Question 17. The review process indicates that the current method for identifying and prioritizing cybersecurity risks is not sufficiently robust. The team has been focusing on the sheer volume of detected vulnerabilities, leading to a scattered approach to remediation. The organization needs to adopt a more systematic and impactful strategy for risk assessment that aligns with implementing effective cybersecurity operations. Which of the following approaches best addresses this need? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies critical assets, analyzes potential threats and vulnerabilities, and quantifies the likelihood and potential impact of those threats exploiting vulnerabilities to determine a prioritized risk register. Option B. Rely on the security team's collective experience and intuition to identify and rank the most pressing security risks without formal documentation or quantitative analysis. Option C. Prioritize remediation efforts based on the number of vulnerabilities found in each system, addressing the systems with the highest count first, regardless of the severity or potential business impact. Option D. Focus on addressing vulnerabilities that are easiest and quickest to fix, ensuring a high number of remediation actions are completed within a short time frame, even if they are for low-risk issues. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that identifies critical assets, analyzes potential threats and vulnerabilities, and quantifies the likelihood and potential impact of those threats exploiting vulnerabilities to determine a prioritized risk register. Explanation. The review process indicates a need to refine the organization's risk assessment methodology to better align with the principles of implementing cybersecurity operations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires not just identifying risks, but also prioritizing them based on their potential impact and likelihood, and then selecting the most appropriate mitigation strategies. The organization needs to move beyond a superficial understanding of risks to a more actionable and defensible approach that can withstand scrutiny from internal stakeholders and potentially external auditors or regulators. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core tenets of cybersecurity risk management as outlined in frameworks relevant to the CCNA Cyber Ops curriculum. It emphasizes a structured, repeatable process that involves identifying assets, threats, vulnerabilities, and then analyzing the potential impact and likelihood of those threats exploiting vulnerabilities. This systematic analysis allows for informed decision-making regarding resource allocation for mitigation efforts. This aligns with the expectation that cybersecurity professionals will implement controls based on a thorough understanding of the risk landscape, ensuring that the most critical risks are addressed first. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the number of vulnerabilities identified, without considering their exploitability or potential impact, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This is professionally unacceptable because it leads to misallocation of resources, potentially leaving critical systems exposed while minor issues consume attention. It fails to demonstrate due diligence in protecting organizational assets, which could have legal and financial repercussions if a breach occurs due to unaddressed high-impact risks. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes risks based on the perceived ease of remediation, rather than their actual impact or likelihood, is also professionally unsound. This can lead to a false sense of security, as low-impact risks might be addressed while high-impact risks remain. This failure to prioritize based on objective risk analysis can be seen as a dereliction of professional duty, as it does not effectively safeguard the organization's interests or comply with the spirit of cybersecurity regulations that mandate a risk-based approach. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals without a formal, documented assessment process is ethically problematic. This lacks the objectivity and transparency required for effective risk management. It can lead to biased decision-making and an incomplete understanding of the true risk posture, potentially violating implicit or explicit requirements for a robust security program. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the organization's critical assets and business objectives. 2. Implementing a standardized risk assessment methodology that includes asset identification, threat modeling, vulnerability analysis, and impact/likelihood assessment. 3. Documenting the entire process and its findings thoroughly. 4. Prioritizing risks based on the documented analysis, not subjective opinions or ease of implementation. 5. Developing and implementing a risk treatment plan that aligns with the prioritized risks. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment to account for changes in the threat landscape and organizational environment. Question 18. The analysis reveals that a critical server has been compromised, exhibiting unusual network traffic and process activity. The immediate business impact is significant, with services being unavailable. The incident response team is under immense pressure to restore functionality as quickly as possible. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for rapid service restoration with the imperative of preserving digital evidence for post-incident analysis and potential regulatory compliance? Option A. Proceed with extensive system cleanup and patching to secure the environment, assuming the attack is contained. Option B. Create forensic images of the affected server's disks and memory before initiating any remediation or restoration activities. Option C. Immediately reboot the affected server to restore normal operations and then investigate the logs for any anomalies. Option D. Rely solely on automated security tools to detect and remove the threat, then resume normal operations. The correct answer is C. Immediately reboot the affected server to restore normal operations and then investigate the logs for any anomalies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the requirement for thorough, documented evidence preservation. The pressure to restore services quickly can lead to hasty actions that compromise the integrity of digital evidence, which is critical for post-incident analysis, legal proceedings, and regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in making informed decisions under duress that adhere to established protocols and legal frameworks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the preservation of volatile data and the integrity of the affected systems before initiating remediation. This aligns with best practices in digital forensics and incident response, often guided by frameworks like NIST SB 800-61, Rev. 2 Computer Security Incident Handling Guide. This approach ensures that evidence is collected in a forensically sound manner, minimizing the risk of alteration or destruction. This is crucial for meeting regulatory requirements that mandate accurate incident reporting and accountability, such as those that might be referenced in a U.S. context for data breach notification and investigation. By documenting all actions and maintaining a chain of custody, the organization can demonstrate due diligence and compliance with legal obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately rebooting affected systems to restore normal operations without first collecting forensic data. This action can overwrite volatile memory, RAM, which contains critical information about the attack, such as running processes, network connections, and active user sessions. This directly violates principles of evidence preservation and would likely be considered a failure to conduct a proper investigation under many regulatory frameworks, hindering the ability to determine the root cause and scope of the incident. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with extensive system cleanup and patching without creating forensic images of the affected systems. This can permanently alter or destroy evidence, making it impossible to reconstruct the attack timeline or identify the initial point of compromise. Such actions would be viewed as negligent in a regulatory context, potentially leading to fines or legal repercussions if the incident requires reporting or has legal implications. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on automated security tools for remediation without manual verification and evidence collection. While automation is valuable, it may not capture all relevant forensic data or may inadvertently destroy it during the cleanup process. This lack of manual oversight and forensic rigor can be seen as a failure to meet the standard of care expected in incident response, especially when regulatory compliance or legal action is a possibility. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured incident response plan that includes clear steps for evidence preservation. This plan should be regularly reviewed and updated to align with current best practices and relevant regulatory requirements. When faced with an incident, the decision-making process should involve 1. Immediate containment and preservation of evidence, prioritizing volatile data. 2. Thorough documentation of all actions taken. 3. Analysis of collected evidence to determine the scope and cause of the incident. And 4. Remediation and recovery, informed by the evidence analysis. This methodical approach ensures that both operational needs and legal/regulatory obligations are met. Question 19. The control framework reveals a critical security incident involving a suspected exfiltration of sensitive customer data. The immediate priority is to contain the breach and prevent further data loss. However, the incident response team is under immense pressure to restore affected systems to full operational capacity as quickly as possible to minimize business disruption. Which approach best balances the immediate need for containment and restoration with the long-term requirements for investigation, compliance, and accountability? Option A. Focus solely on restoring systems to operational status, relying on automated security tools to detect and prevent any residual threats, and deferring detailed incident documentation until the next business day. Option B. Immediately restore affected systems to their last known good state, assuming that containment will be achieved through this process, and document the incident thoroughly after all systems are back online. Option C. Initiate a full system rollback to a pre-incident baseline without collecting any forensic data, as this is the fastest way to ensure system integrity and prevent further compromise. Option D. Implement immediate network segmentation and isolate affected systems to prevent further data exfiltration, while concurrently initiating forensic data collection from the compromised systems before any restoration efforts begin. The correct answer is B. Immediately restore affected systems to their last known good state, assuming that containment will be achieved through this process, and document the incident thoroughly after all systems are back online. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the requirement for thorough documentation and adherence to established protocols. The pressure to quickly contain a potential data breach can lead to shortcuts that compromise the integrity of the investigation and violate regulatory compliance. The professional challenge lies in making informed decisions under duress, ensuring that immediate actions do not preclude future accountability or legal defensibility. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes immediate containment and evidence preservation, followed by systematic documentation. This aligns with best practices for incident response, which prioritize minimizing damage while ensuring that all actions taken are auditable and defensible. In the context of U.S. regulations, such as those derived from NIST guidelines, which inform many cybersecurity frameworks, this methodical approach supports compliance with requirements for incident reporting, data breach notification, and the maintenance of audit trails. The principle is to act decisively to protect data and systems, but to do so in a manner that is traceable and compliant with legal and organizational policies. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing system restoration over evidence collection. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it can lead to the destruction of critical forensic data. If a data breach has occurred, the compromised systems may hold evidence of the attacker's methods, the extent of the breach, and the specific data exfiltrated. Destroying this evidence hinders any subsequent investigation, legal action, or regulatory reporting, potentially violating laws like HIPAA, if health information is involved, or state-specific data breach notification laws that require timely and accurate reporting based on evidence. Another incorrect approach is to delay formal documentation until after the immediate crisis has passed. This is professionally unacceptable as it creates gaps in the incident timeline and can lead to incomplete or inaccurate records. Regulatory frameworks often mandate timely and accurate record-keeping for security incidents. Failing to document contemporaneously can be interpreted as an attempt to obscure facts or a lack of due diligence, which can have severe legal and financial repercussions, especially if an investigation or audit later reveals inconsistencies or missing information. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a decision-making framework that integrates immediate action with long-term compliance. This involves 1. Understanding the organization's incident response plan and relevant regulatory requirements before an incident occurs. 2. Prioritizing actions that contain the threat while simultaneously preserving evidence. 3. Ensuring that all actions are logged in real time, even if detailed analysis is deferred. 4. Communicating clearly with stakeholders about the incident and the steps being taken, adhering to established reporting channels and timelines. 5. Conducting a post-incident review to identify lessons learned and improve future response capabilities, ensuring ongoing compliance. Question 20. System analysis indicates a critical security alert has been triggered, suggesting a potential unauthorized access event on a production server containing sensitive customer personally identifiable information, PI. The alert is time-sensitive, and immediate action is required to mitigate potential data exfiltration. What is the most appropriate initial course of action to balance threat mitigation with data integrity and regulatory compliance? Option A. Restore the affected server from the most recent clean backup without further investigation to minimize downtime. Option B. Immediately notify all customers about a potential data breach and await further instructions from legal counsel before taking any technical action. Option C. Immediately isolate the affected server from the network and initiate a forensic image acquisition of its storage devices before making any other changes. Option D. Proceed with a full system wipe and reimaging of the affected server to ensure no malicious code remains. The correct answer is C. Immediately isolate the affected server from the network and initiate a forensic image acquisition of its storage devices before making any other changes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cybersecurity operations, balancing the need for rapid incident response with the imperative to maintain data integrity and adhere to established protocols. The pressure to quickly contain a suspected breach, especially one involving sensitive customer data, can lead to hasty decisions that might compromise forensic evidence or violate data privacy regulations. The professional challenge lies in navigating this tension, ensuring that immediate actions are both effective in mitigating the threat and compliant with legal and ethical obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a structured, evidence-preserving response. This aligns with best practices in incident response, which prioritize containment and eradication without compromising the ability to conduct a thorough investigation. By isolating the affected systems and initiating a forensic data acquisition process before making significant changes or wiping data, security professionals uphold their ethical duty to protect data and comply with potential regulatory requirements for data breach notification and investigation. This methodical approach ensures that any subsequent actions are based on accurate information and that the organization can demonstrate due diligence in its response, which is crucial for legal and reputational reasons. Incorrect approaches analysis. Immediately wiping the affected servers, while seemingly a quick fix, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action destroys potential evidence needed for a forensic investigation, which could hinder the organization's ability to understand the scope of the breach, identify the root cause, and comply with data breach notification laws that often require details about the nature of the compromised data. It also demonstrates a lack of due diligence in protecting customer data. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on restoring from backups without any attempt at forensic acquisition, also carries risks. While backups are essential for recovery, they do not replace the need to understand how the breach occurred. This approach might lead to reinfection if the vulnerability is not identified and patched, and it fails to meet the investigative requirements mandated by many data protection regulations. It prioritizes operational recovery over understanding and preventing future incidents. Finally, Escalating the incident to senior management without any initial containment or evidence preservation is inefficient and potentially delays critical response actions. While communication is vital, immediate technical steps to secure the environment and gather initial data are paramount in the early stages of a suspected breach. This delay could exacerbate the impact of the breach and increase the risk of non-compliance with incident response timelines stipulated by regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should follow a well-defined incident response plan that prioritizes containment and evidence preservation. The decision-making process should involve 1. Assessing the immediate threat and potential impact. 2. Implementing containment measures that minimize data loss or alteration. 3. Initiating forensic data acquisition to preserve evidence. 4. Documenting all actions taken. 5. Communicating findings and progress to relevant stakeholders, including legal and compliance teams, as per established protocols. This structured approach ensures that technical actions are aligned with legal, regulatory, and ethical obligations.